Every time I come out here, Vinny's doing a job and you're holding his hand.
Me and him split everything. We started yesterday.
Get your hands dirty for a change. Do some welding and grinding instead of watching everybody else do it.
Every bike that needs to get built gets done. Everybody's working at all times. And you know what? 10 years. This is the kind of stuff we've been dealing with for 10 years.
Paulie Teutul was undeniably the most talented person in the shop, yet his father fired him.
But there did come that time where you and your dad kind of parted ways.
Yeah.
I mean, he fired you.
He did. At the time, it was really tough, but when I look back, it was the best thing.
He played a crucial role in establishing Orange County Choppers as a legendary motorcycle brand, but faced harsh criticism from a father who struggled with his son's creative prowess.
I've found a lot of forgiveness and understanding towards my own father because of having my own son.
What did this firing truly cost him? How much of the wealth did he miss out on? Join us as we explore the tragic story of Paulie Teutul and examine his life beyond the conflict that surrounded him. The kid who grew up in the shop. Paulie Teutul Jr. did not choose the bike world. He was basically born into it. His father, Paul Sr., ran Orange County Iron Works in New York, and from around the age of 12, Paul Jr. was spending his summers in that shop learning to work metal before most kids his age had figured out what they wanted to be when they grew up. By the time he was a teenager, he was genuinely skilled, and the skills he built in that environment would eventually make him famous. None of that was accidental. It came from thousands of hours of unglamorous work in a fabrication shop. When Paul Sr. decided to change Orange County Choppers into the custom motorcycle space, Paul Jr. was right there with him. The two co-founded OCC together in 1999, and Paul Jr. became the chief designer and fabricator of the operation. His father brought the personality and the business drive. Paul Jr. brought the actual creative vision that made the bikes look the way they looked. That split of roles was the engine of everything that came after, and it was also the fault line that eventually blew the whole thing up. The Discovery Channel came knocking in 2002 after a one-off special about building a jet bike for a motorcycle event got incredible ratings. The network saw the father-son dynamic, the wild bikes, and the genuinely unpredictable arguments between two strong personalities and decided it was television gold. They were absolutely right. American Chopper premiered in 2003 and became one of the most watched reality shows on cable television, pulling in millions of viewers every week who could not get enough of the Teutul family drama. Paul Jr. was 28 when the show launched, and from the start, he was the creative heartbeat of the whole thing. The bikes he designed were genuinely extraordinary. Themed builds for clients, ranging from corporate giants to military branches, came out of his hands looking like nothing the motorcycle world had seen before. He was not just a TV personality doing a job for the cameras. He was an actual artist who happened to be working in steel and chrome, and the audience sensed that authenticity immediately. But behind the creative brilliance and the incredible bikes, a relationship between father and son was slowly fracturing in ways that no camera angle could fully capture. The fight that the whole country watched. If there is one thing American Chopper is remembered for beyond the bikes, it is the arguments. Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. had a dynamic that was genuinely fascinating and genuinely painful to watch at the same time. Paul Sr. was old school in every sense, loud, demanding, and not particularly interested in being told when something was not working. Paul Jr. was more introverted, more focused on the design work, and reportedly less interested in the performance aspects of running a business than his father wanted him to be. Insiders who worked at OCC during the show claimed the on-camera screaming matches were actually the mild version of what happened behind the scenes. The real fighting was over who deserved the credit, who held the power, and whose vision was actually making the company rich. Paul Jr. was designing the exact bikes that made OCC famous, but his father was the one doing all the interviews and acting like the face of the brand. It is unclear if they ever agreed to that setup or if it just happened, but sources say it caused massive bitterness on both sides. Things came to a head in 2008 when Paul Sr. fired Paul Jr. from Orange County Choppers after an escalating series of disagreements. The firing was not quiet or dignified. It played out in front of production cameras and became one of the most talked about moments in reality TV that year. Fans were shocked, not because the relationship had seemed stable, but because seeing it finally collapse on screen hit differently than the slow-motion arguments that had led up to it. What came after the firing was a lawsuit between father and son that dragged through the courts for years. The settlement involved Paul Sr. buying out Paul Jr.'s 20% stake in OCC, which sounds clean on paper but was reportedly anything but clean in practice. Allegedly, people close to the situation have claimed the financial terms of that settlement left Paul Jr. feeling like he got significantly less than his contribution to the company had been worth. The creative output that had built OCC's reputation had largely come from his hands, and the buyout number did not reflect that in the way he felt it should. And the money situation after leaving OCC was a lot more complicated than most people who followed the show ever realized. The fortune that got complicated. Here is where the heartbreak in the title really starts to make sense. At the peak of American Chopper's popularity, the Teutul family was making serious money. Paul Sr. was reportedly pulling in around $100,000 per episode during the show's most successful seasons. The OCC brand had expanded into merchandise, licensing deals, and a corporate client roster that included some of the biggest companies in America. From the outside, it looked like everyone involved was getting rich together. The reality for Paul Jr. was more complicated. His 20% stake in OCC was meaningful but not controlling, which meant that when the relationship with his father deteriorated, he had limited power over what happened to the brand he had helped build. The lawsuit settlement that ended his time at OCC reportedly resolved the financial dispute, but the number Paul Jr. walked away with was widely estimated to be considerably less than what the company was worth at its height. There was also a 2007 lawsuit from Turner Construction that added another layer of financial messiness to the whole picture. The lawsuit alleged fraudulent transfer of assets involving Paul Sr., Paul Jr., and brother Daniel, and the settlement required Orange County LLC to pay $500,000 to be distributed to creditors. Paul Jr. was not the primary target of that action, but being named in a lawsuit about alleged asset transfers is not a great look, and reportedly added high legal costs to an already expensive period in his life. His net worth estimates today sits somewhere between $2 million and $10 million, depending on the source, with most serious estimates landing closer to the lower end of that range. For a man who was central to building a brand that generated tens of millions in revenue over a decade of television, that number tells a story about how the money moved and who it moved to. Allegedly, people close to Paul Jr. have claimed he is philosophical about it now, but that the financial outcome of his years at OCC was a genuine source of pain for a long time after he left. But walking out of OCC with a complicated payout was not the end of the Paul Jr. story. It was actually the beginning of the version he got to write himself. Starting over with Paul Jr. Designs. After the firing and the settlement, Paul Jr. had a one-year non-compete clause in his contract that stopped him from immediately starting a rival motorcycle business. That year was reportedly not easy. He had gone from being the face of one of the most watched shows on television to sitting on the sidelines, watching the industry he had helped transform keep moving without him. Allegedly, sources close to him during that period have claimed The non-compete year was one of the most psychologically difficult stretches of his adult life. The moment the non-compete expired, he moved. Paul Jr. Designs launched in Montgomery, New York, with former OCC employees joining him, including Vinnie DiMartino, who had been one of the most popular supporting cast members on American Chopper. The team brought serious credibility, and the shop immediately started attracting the kind of corporate clients who wanted a bike build that felt genuinely creative rather than just technically competent. The client list for Paul Jr. Designs was actually crazy. The shop built custom bikes for World of Warcraft, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Microsoft, and Nike. Every single corporate brand wanted a custom chopper for a marketing campaign or a giant event. Each build gave Paul Jr. a chance to do exactly what he was best at. He took a basic corporate theme and turned it into a piece of heavy metal that made people stop and stare. The work proved once and for all that his talent back at OCC had nothing to do with his father's company. The talent belonged to him alone. Building a multi-thousand-dollar motorcycle styled after a cartoon turtle just to prove to your dad that you can survive without him is a genuinely hilarious way to handle a family grudge. The Discovery Channel eventually came back with a spin-off series called American Chopper, Senior versus Junior, built entirely around the rivalry between OCC and Paul Jr. Designs. Father and son were now running competing shops, occasionally forced to work together for clients who wanted both names on a single bike. The whole disaster played out on screen, with the same explosive screaming matches that made the original show popular. Insiders who worked on the production crew claimed that those forced collaborations were way more miserable and awkward off-camera than the edited episodes ever showed. And while the professional side of things was finding its footing again, Paul Jr.'s personal life was quietly becoming the best part of his whole story. The marriage, the son, and what actually matters. In August 2010, Paul Jr. married Rachel Beaster, a model and actress he had been dating for a while, and the wedding was covered by TLC's Say Yes to the Dress, which tells fans everything about how public their relationship was from the start. The pairing made sense in ways that went beyond the television appearances. Rachel was reportedly the kind of grounding presence that Paul Jr. genuinely needed after years of working inside a family dynamic that was loud, chaotic, and emotionally exhausting in ways the show only partially communicated. In February 2015, their son, Hudson Seven Teutul, was born, and by multiple accounts, the arrival of Hudson fundamentally reordered Paul Jr.'s priorities in a way that nothing else had. Paul Jr. has said in interviews that his focus now is on building a great relationship with his son, which is a sentence that lands differently when the reader knows how complicated and painful the relationship between Paul Jr. and his own father was during the years that defined both of their public identities. Insiders who have hung out with Paul Jr. lately claim that becoming a dad completely changed how he talks about his own childhood and his brutal years at OCC. Sources say he has spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to raise a son when business and family get totally tangled up. He is reportedly determined to make sure his son, Hudson, feels supported no matter what path the kid chooses. This is either a great ending to a miserable family history or the most depressing reality check in the whole story. And, honestly, it is probably both. The family lives in Montgomery, New York, right where the bike shop is located. By all accounts, the home life is actually stable and normal, which is a massive contrast to the toxic television years. Rachel has kept her own career and social media presence completely separate from the motorcycle world. That boundary apparently gives the house a level of peace that Paul Jr. never had while trapped in the OCC circus. Sometimes the best thing a person can build has absolutely nothing to do with a motorcycle. But the full picture of Paul Jr.'s story cannot be told without addressing the reconciliation that fans never expected to see happen, and the complicated feelings it brought up for everyone involved. The reconciliation nobody expected. For years after the big firing, everyone assumed Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. were completely done with each other. The massive lawsuit, the forced buyout, the competing shops, and the screaming matches on camera did not give anyone hope for a happy ending. Fans picked their sides and stuck with them. Most people treated the father-son feud like a real, permanent family destruction instead of a temporary TV drama that would eventually just blow over. Watching a father and son sue each other over custom motorcycles while millions of strangers cheer from their couches is a spectacular example of peak American entertainment. What actually happened was more complicated and more human than either camp had predicted. Over time, the two men began finding ways back toward each other, partly through the demands of the television content that kept them in the same room, and partly through the ordinary passage of time that changes how people hold old grudges. A notable moment came when the two shops were brought together to build a bike for ABC Supply Company, and Paul Jr. made the deliberate choice to let his father lead the design because he simply wanted the experience of building something with him one more time, without it turning into a battle. Allegedly, sources close to both men have claimed the reconciliation has never been fully clean or simple, and that there are still topics and memories that create tension when they come up. But the open warfare of the peak television years has reportedly settled into something closer to a working peace, with both men respecting the distance the other needs while remaining connected through the family and the industry they both still inhabit. Paul Jr. has described wanting to have fun building a bike with his father without the drama, which is a quietly devastating sentence from a man who spent years having the exact opposite experience. The real tragedy of the reconciliation is not that it happened, but that it took so long and caused so much public humiliation before either guy backed down. Insiders who know the Teutul's claim Paul Jr. is still quietly carrying the weight of that family history, even if he acts fine on camera. Healing a broken relationship like that is a non-stop process rather than a finished goal. A story with that much damage does not get a clean ending. The present is just slightly less terrible than the past. And in 2025, the question the whole OCC fanbase keeps asking is what Paul Teutul Jr. is actually building now, and whether the best chapter of his career is still ahead of him. Where Paul Jr. is now and what comes next. Paul Jr. Designs is still open in Montgomery, New York, making custom motorcycles that get noticed by the bike community. The massive corporate projects have completely disappeared since the peak years of the show. That is mostly because using a custom chopper as a marketing gimmick is a dead trend, and because Paul Jr. is apparently way more picky about his clients now. Insiders claim he turns down more work than he actually takes these days, choosing to focus on projects that are actually interesting instead of just chasing a quick paycheck. His social media presence keeps the fan base connected, with posts across platforms that give followers a window into current builds and personal milestones. Paul Jr. Designs has expanded into merchandise and branding work alongside the custom bike builds, which gives the business multiple income streams rather than relying entirely on the cost and timeline of individual commission work. That diversification is smarter than the OCC model, which was heavily dependent on the television deal for its highest revenue. Insiders claim there are talks about a new television project that would put Paul Jr. Designs on a major streaming platform instead of old cable networks. The rumors suggest the new format would focus entirely on the actual bike designs and completely skip the family drama. That approach makes total sense for Paul Jr., since the screaming matches and family feuds caused him the most documented misery throughout his entire career. Whether these casual conversations actually turn into a real streaming series is completely up in the air. The real tragedy for Paul Teutul Jr. is not one massive disaster. It is just the slow cost of being incredibly talented in a family business that cares way more about drama than actual work. He designed some of the most famous custom motorcycles on the planet, built a television brand that millions of people watched every week, and walked away with a tiny fraction of the money he actually earned. He left with a broken family that took a decade to fix and a net worth that does not match his fame. Today, he has a solid marriage, a son he is determined to raise right, and a bike shop that still makes cool things. For a guy whose life could have completely train-wrecked, things worked out fine. So did Paul Teutul Jr. get what he deserved from the empire he helped build? Or did the Teutul family dynamic cost him more than the cameras ever showed? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.